Hey guys, I'm going to be making the song StarCruiser. In this first part, I'm going to start doing chops for the track, so let's not waste any time. So the sample that I'm using is Stacy Ladisaw's Screaming Off the Top. The first thing I want to do is I want to find the tempo of the track. So I'm using the tab feature so I can approximate the tempo, and then little by little I'm going to be adjusting it as I go through the song. So I'm going to align the first couple beats, and then I'm going to go further into the song and see when it's a little off, and then I'll just adjust it bit by bit. Using this method, I'm not going to get it perfectly, but hopefully I can get it just approximate enough so that any compensation that I'll have to do is just very minute, very little. So right now I've sort of discovered the first couple chops I want to do. Before you make something really elaborate, you have to start small. And really, sometimes just the most simple slices are good enough. I'm not expecting a lot of new artists to start chopping up a song like crazy. But, as we go further into the video, hopefully you'll be able to pick up on what some artists, look for when they're trying to put a song together, rather than just, looping over a whole song and then throwing drums on it. So as of now, I'm compensating for the delays, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of the chopping portion. So, for the most part, I'm going to skip a lot of that in post-production. I want to make a couple of points, but at the same time, I want the video to be short enough so that the information is digestible. So right now I added an extra portion to the loop that I'm making, and I'm going to be looking at the remaining parts of the song and see what else I can draw from that. Part of it is listening through the ear, and then the other part is through trial and error. And I'm going to be playing with the tempo of the song because I still haven't decided at the time how fast I wanted to make this song. So I can make it very slow, very laid back, or really really upbeat, like a French house type vibe. So this is the more experimental part. It's gonna be frustrating at a couple points, but this is the part where you really show off your creativity, and you sort of weigh in on what works and what doesn't. So for example, stacking that sample didn't work out, but the trumpets actually did fit quite nicely in that loop. So I'm going to be little by little adjusting it so that it has a nice natural flow to it. The nice part of the trumpet portion is that I can sort of repeat it a couple times within the loop. I think twice in 2 bars is good enough. I don't want to overdo it. So what I'm doing now is a nice little method that I do every now and then, and it's to use a low pass filter. That way the only thing I can hear is the bass line. So when I'm doing chops, I'm just listening to the bass line. So I could be able to find a nice little variation to it, which I wouldn't have noticed beforehand. And a lot of times it's gonna work, a lot of times it's not. So in this case, there's gonna be 2 pieces that I've put in. One is going to sort of work, and the other one I'm going to keep. You just gotta keep trying and see what works, and you might come across something that you may have thought may have not worked before, but may work in this case. I didn't pick this song because I knew for sure that I was gonna find something. It's just I heard a couple things that I liked, and I said, well, okay, maybe I can put something together. I tried to work on the sample before anything else because I've learned from experience, and I've had many cases where I've done mixing, I've built the drums and everything on a loop that I thought would work, but then as I go further into the track, I start to not like the sample, and I just basically have some really nice sounding drums, and that's about it. Now, am I saying to completely avoid doing drums and all that while you're still building a song? No. I'm just saying that you need to have the concept solidified before you start doing the more technical parts of producing a song. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move everything that, I haven't put together a little bit to the right. That way I have some more room to, copy, paste, and then, add a little bit more variation there. So, I have a nice little loop here. Sounds really good. And the next thing I want to do is how much I can, add more variation. This sounds pretty good on its own, but, I could see that I could put a little bit more into it. The next thing I did is I actually took away some variation from the first two bars. That way it would sound slightly different from the other two bars. And it's those subtle changes that can make a huge difference. As long as it doesn't ruin the flow of the song, anything goes. So I have this piece here, and I'm going to be looking on how I can add to the song. So by itself, it's pretty okay. It's standard. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up the loops that I've made, stack it under that loop, and just see how I can sort of mesh them together. I'm going to be doing this method over and over again, and really the best way I can explain it to you is to just show you. I've been getting a lot of messages on how to do chopping and all that stuff, and it's a bit challenging for me to sort of explain to you how to chop because there's many different ways to do it. Everyone has their own method, so I prefer just showing you what I do. And then, you could just sort of absorb that information and see how you could apply it to your tracks. The creative aspect is a lot harder to teach than the technical part. The creative part really depends on taste. And so chopping is very challenging because not only does it require work in the creative department, but it also requires a lot of technical skill. And really the best thing I can show you is just the technical part of it. But once again, it shouldn't have to matter how complex the chopping is. What really matters the most is if it sounds unique. The size of the chops don't necessarily matter, but you have to ask yourself, how is it going to be different from the source material? Once again, I'm making some more space. So I'm constantly going back to the source material and, looking at what else can I take from this. And if you listen to the finished track, you'll see that I'm starting to hear like a lot of elements that I'm going to put later in the song. But, as I'm, listening to this over and over again, I'm slowly starting to pick up on what I want to put in eventually. The nice thing about using the whole sample in the playlist is that I could just go to any part of the song and, just chop like any small bits that I like, save it for later, and, if I don't need it, I can just delete it easily. For example, this portion I kind of like, and in the final cut, I'm going to be using it as sort of the outro of the song. Once again, with the loops that I've built, I'm going to try and layer in another portion of the song and see how I can put it together. Me personally, when it comes to the chorus, I like to add something new or different every single time. That way, when you hear it, it doesn't sound as repetitive. So what I found here is actually a nice little loop that I can use as a transition from one part of the song to the next. So, I'm not going to do any effects to it yet. I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to go back to that later, to make it sound more refined. So once again, I'm just revising what I have so far, and I'm looking at what else can I put into it. I added 4 more bars to this current loop that I've worked on, and yeah, I'm just constantly seeing like what else I can do. So I'm going to test the waters again and see if, things work out pretty well. And just from listening to like a bit of it, I can pick up a couple of things that might work together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that loop and then duplicate it so that I could work on it. Now that I've added those 2 pieces, I'm going to copy and paste it throughout this portion. After that, I'm going to make the respective adjustments so it sounds well, so it flows well. And once we've applied all the changes to the rest of the next couple bars, I want to add a couple more chops to sort of mark the transition. Whether a sample is chopped up or not, just looping it over and over again will simply make it sound repetitive. So during transition areas where it goes from one song, from one piece to the next, it's helpful to add like a little bit of variation around the end. That way the listener can tell that the song is about to change course. Afterwards, I'm going to duplicate this section and sort of expand on it a bit. Build it up. That way, the next time you hear it, it's going to have a little twist to it. So I'm listening to this part of the song,
and I'm looking at how I can stack this on top of this section. So here I'm looking at what I could swap out, and this is going to really like change up this whole part, where it's still reminiscent. It still sounds very similar to the first time you hear it. It still carries the same flow, but it has enough variation to not sound repetitive. So now that I have enough variation that's satisfying, I'm just going to copy and paste it to the next two bars, and then I'm just going to do the adjustments. Using one of the previous cuts that I made, I can expand it, and it'll serve as a nice little transition piece to glue together one section with the other. So with that found, I'm going to use this section here to transition out that part of the song. If you ever get a lot of space, what I like to do is I like to cut a very small piece on one side of the track and then just sort of copy and paste it to fill it up. So I'm listening to this whole thing and I'm just seeing, what things need to be fixed or adjusted. And so far everything sounds pretty good. So I'm just going to move on to the next thing. I want to add something else because as of now, the song has like an A-B-A-B structure. So I kind of want to add something a little different. And listening to this part, I'm picking up a new set of chops. And so I'm listening to it, I'm playing around on the playlist, and I'm getting the idea. And then once I get a small idea, I'm just going to chop it up and put it together and see what happens. So very similar to what I did in the very beginning. I have very simple chops, just something to be the foundation. And then what I do is I build up on that foundation. So I'm still listening to the same original verse, and I'm getting little pieces from it, and I'm throwing it in the loop that I've made. And, that's basically how we start the variation. So far it sounds pretty good, but still somewhat repetitive. So I kind of want to add a new chop and add it on every fourth bar. So this part where she says ecstasy, I'm going to place that on the fourth bar. But first I'm going to duplicate the loop and then pretty much throw that piece right smack in the middle. So there was a note from the bass line that I wasn't particularly fond of. So I looked back into the sample and see what I could replace it with. Sounds much better. So I'm going to repeat the process for the last 4 bars, except I'm going to use a different sample. That way, it adds more variety. In addition, instead of using the part where she says ecstasy, I'm going to use a different part. So the new part I added sounds really nice, but there's something missing from it. So I'm going to combine that part as well as the part where she says ecstasy, and it's going to fit quite nicely. But you know what? Let's go as far as adding a third part. So same thing, I'm going to stack this on top, and I'm going to adjust it. So with that being said, I was pretty satisfied with those set of chops, so I'm going to change around the structure. Now I had it previously as an AB-ABC, but now I'm going to have it as an ABC-AB. And I mean that in terms of structure. So you're going to hear 2 parts, then something like an intermission before you go back to hearing the same 2 parts, but those 2 parts are going to have a little bit of variety the second time. That way, when you hear it over again, it's not the same thing. It's got a little bit of extra stuff to it. Right now, I am doubling the length of the intermission because I felt like the time that it was given was just not enough. So originally, in this empty space here, I kind of wanted to add something different, you know, like a new set of chops. And I'm playing around with like different loops and stuff. But at the end of the day, I decided to just use the same intermission. And you know, once I get further into the production, I'm just going to add a little bit more variety into that. You know, once I have the last loop put down, I basically have the general structure of the song. Once I found the perfect loop for the outro, you know, I'm just going to do a very simple loop on it and, you know, put it at the very end. I don't want to go too crazy with it because this whole loop is supposed to wrap up the song. I don't want to build any more like tension or anything like that. So that's the general structure of the song. I'm not entirely done with chopping, but it's for sure something I'm going to be doing little by little as I'm slowly forming the track together. When I originally made this track, I didn't really expect it to be this complicated, but the fundamental idea for chopping still stands. You can find something very simple, make very simple chops, and then if you want to make it more complicated, more elaborate, you can just simply build up from that, from those original chops. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to be going over the drum processing and the mixing, as well as other things as I continue to work on this track. If you're interested in hearing the final product, it is done. I will put up a link in the description below. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. If you like this tutorial, please check out all the other ones that I have in my channel. Until then, see you next time.